My name is Maya, and for 7 long years, I was the invisible ghost haunting the corridors of Apex Designs. To the world, Apex was a beacon of modern architecture, a place where dreams were carved out of glass and steel. But to me, it was a gilded cage where my talent was harvested and my voice was systematically erased. I wasn't just an employee. I was the one who breathed life into every blueprint. I was the one who stayed in the office until the sun began to peek through the skyscrapers, fixing the catastrophic errors made by senior partners who were too busy at cocktail parties to understand the physics of their own designs. Yet, in the eyes of my boss, Mr. Arthur Sterling, I was nothing more than deadweight. He was a man who possessed a predatory kind of charisma, the kind that allowed him to steal the brilliance of others and wear it like a tailored suit. I remember one specific afternoon, during a celebratory lunch for a project I had practically designed single-handedly. Mr. Sterling stood up, raised his glass to the board of directors, and pointed at me with a condescending smirk. "Maya here is like the plumbing in a grand mansion," he said, and the room erupted in laughter. "She's necessary, she's hidden behind the walls, and frankly, no one wants to think about her unless something starts to smell. Maya, you should be eternally grateful that I give you a seat at this table, even if it is at the very end." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar sting of humiliation, but I did what I always did. I looked down at my plate and remained silent. I told myself that the buildings I created would be my legacy, that the steel and concrete would remember me even if the people didn't. The toxicity of the office wasn't just limited to Mr. Sterling. It was fueled by Sarah, a young woman I had personally mentored for 3 years. When Sarah first arrived as a wide-eyed graduate, I saw a spark in her that reminded me of myself. I poured everything I knew into her. I taught her the nuances of structural integrity, the art of client psychology, and the secret language of light and space. I shared my private journals with her, journals filled with revolutionary ideas for sustainable urban living. I thought I was building a sisterhood. I didn't realize I was sharpening the knife that would eventually be buried in my back. Sarah was a master of a different craft, the craft of corporate manipulation. She learned how to mirror Mr. Sterling's ego, how to subtly belittle my contributions in meetings, and how to present my midnight breakthroughs as her own morning inspirations. She began to isolate me, whispering to the other junior architects that I was unstable and difficult to work with. Slowly, the office I had built with my own sweat became a place where I was a stranger. But the pain at the office was nothing compared to the coldness I faced at home. I am the youngest child of the Foster family, a lineage of high-achieving perfectionists. My father, a retired Supreme Court judge, viewed anything less than a career in law or medicine as a failure of character. My 2 older siblings, David and Elena, were both celebrated surgeons. To them, my love for architecture was a whim, a childish pursuit of drawing pretty pictures. Every Sunday dinner at the Foster estate was a masterclass in psychological warfare. David would recount his latest successful neurosurgery, and Elena would detail her groundbreaking research in oncology. My father would listen with a pride that he never once showed me. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, it was always with a sigh of disappointment. "Still working for that Sterling fellow, Maya?" my father would ask, not even looking up from his steak. "It's a pity you lacked the intellectual stamina for medical school. You're a pathetic failure compared to your brother and sister." Honestly, it's embarrassing to tell our friends that our youngest daughter is basically a glorified draftsperson. "You're lucky we still allow you to use the family name." I would sit there, the silence in my chest growing heavier with every passing year, telling myself that if I could just win one major award, if I could just build one landmark, they would finally see me. I didn't understand then that you cannot make people see you if they have already decided you're invisible. The night the world finally broke me started with a storm. It was a Tuesday in late October, and the rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Apex headquarters. I was alone, as usual, working on the final structural calculations for the Skyline project. This wasn't just any contract, it was a $5 billion government project that would revitalize the city's downtown core. It was the project of a lifetime, and I had poured every ounce of my soul into it. Around 11 p.m., a sudden, terrifying pressure gripped my chest. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart with the force of a hydraulic press. I fell from my chair, the world spinning in violent circles. I realized, with a cold surge of panic, that I was having a severe medical crisis. I crawled toward my desk, my fingers trembling as I reached for my phone. I called David first. He was a doctor. He was my brother. Surely, in this moment of life and death, the sibling bond would transcend his disdain for me. It rang and rang, the sound echoing in the empty office until it went to voicemail. I called Elena. Busy. I called my parents' house. No one picked up. I called them again and again, a desperate, frantic loop of 17 calls in total. I lay on the cold, hard floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come, listening to the rain and the mechanical hum of the office. Each missed call was a message. You are not important. Your life does not matter to us. I eventually managed to dial 911, my voice a mere whisper as I gave the dispatcher our address. As the paramedics arrived and began to load me onto a stretcher, the elevator chimes rang. The doors opened, and out stepped Mr. Sterling and Sarah. They were dressed in formal evening wear, laughing and sharing a bottle of expensive champagne. They had clearly come from a gala to continue their celebration in the office. They stopped when they saw the paramedics. Mr. Sterling didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what had happened. He looked at the lead paramedic and said, "This is highly inconvenient. We have a major presentation tomorrow. Make sure you don't leave any equipment lying around. And Sarah, look at her. This is exactly why I call her deadweight. She can't even handle a little stress without making a scene. Get someone to finish her files immediately." They walked past my stretcher as if I were a piece of trash being removed by the janitorial staff. As I was being wheeled into the ambulance, I saw Sarah looking at my computer screen with a predatory glint in her eyes. I knew then that she wasn't just going to finish my work, she was going to steal it. I spent 6 days in the hospital. I had suffered a stress-induced cardiac event that nearly ended my life. During those 6 days, the silence from my family was absolute. No one came to sit by my bed. No one called the nurses to check on my status. When I finally had the strength to look at my phone, I found a series of messages that were more painful than the heart attack itself. My brother David had sent a text, "I told you to stop calling. We were at the governor's ball. Your constant drama is a burden on this family. Don't expect us to bail you out of your latest crisis." But the most devastating blow came via email from Mr. Sterling. It was a formal termination notice, copied to the entire firm. Due to your repeated failure to meet deadlines, your unprofessional behavior, and evidence brought to our attention regarding your attempts to sabotage the Skyline project, your employment is terminated. We have also initiated a legal review of your recent actions. Your personal items have been disposed of to clear space for more productive members of the team. When I was discharged, I was so weak I could barely stand, but I took a taxi to the office. I needed my personal hard drives, the work of a decade was on them. But the security guards, men I had known for years, blocked my path. "Sorry, Maya," one of them said, looking away in shame. "Mr. Sterling's orders. You're banned from the property. He said if you show up, we're to call the police." Just then, Sarah walked through the lobby, flanked by 2 junior architects who used to be my friends. She was carrying my favorite leather portfolio, the one my grandmother had given me. "Oh, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It's so sad. I found those files where you were planning to sell our designs to the competition." Mr. Sterling was heartbroken. He had to delete everything to protect the firm. "You're not just a failure anymore, you're a criminal." And honestly, no one is surprised. The reaction from my family was the final, crushing weight. My father called me into his study one last time. He didn't ask about my health. He didn't ask how I was going to survive without a job. He looked at me with a cold, detached fury. "You have disgraced the Foster name. A corporate spy? A common thief? We have decided to remove you from the family trust. We are disowning you, Maya. You are replaceable, in this office, in this city, and in this family. We have already told our social circle that you have moved abroad. Do not prove us wrong by staying here. Do not contact us again." I walked out of that house with nothing but a suitcase and the clothes on my back. I was 30 years old, my reputation was in ruins, my family had erased me, and my body was still recovering from a near-death experience. I disappeared. I took the little money I had left and moved to a small, forgotten coastal town 400 miles away. I changed my name to M.A. Phoenix. I worked in a local hardware store during the day, and at night, I sat in a tiny, cramped room with a second-hand laptop I had bought from a pawn shop. I didn't just design buildings, I designed a new version of myself. I started a small, anonymous consulting firm called the Phoenix Group. I used a voice-altering app for calls and never once turned on my camera. I became a ghost in the architectural world, a mysterious figure who could solve the most complex structural problems that baffled the biggest firms in the country. My designs weren't just about aesthetics, they were about the truth of materials, the honesty of space. Slowly, the legend of the Phoenix grew. I wasn't just winning contracts, I was becoming the gold standard of the industry. 3 years passed. Back in the city, Apex Designs was in a state of catastrophic collapse. Sarah had been promoted to lead architect, but she was a fraud who didn't understand the fundamental laws of physics. The Skyline project, my masterpiece, was now a crumbling disaster. The foundation was settling unevenly, the glass facade was cracking, and the entire structure was declared unsafe by the city inspectors. Mr. Sterling was facing a $10 billion class action lawsuit and the very real possibility of a prison sentence. He was desperate. He reached out to the Phoenix Group, begging for a consultation. He offered me a fee that was 5 times the industry standard. I accepted, but I set the terms. I told him I would only present the solution in person, in the city council chambers, in front of the mayor, the board of directors, and every single person who had worked on the project. He was so terrified of losing his empire that he agreed to every single demand. The day of the hearing was the hottest day in the city's history. The air in the council chambers was thick with tension and the smell of expensive perfume and desperation. Mr. Sterling sat at the front, looking like a ghost of his former self. Sarah was beside him, her face a mask of heavy makeup, her hands shaking as she shuffled her useless papers. The mayor stood up and called the meeting to order. "We're here to determine if the Skyline project can be saved, or if we must demolish the structure and hold Apex Designs criminally liable for the failure. Phoenix, the floor is yours." I walked into the room. I wasn't the broken, invisible girl they had discarded 3 years ago. I was a woman who had been forged in the fire of betrayal and tempered in the ice of isolation. I was wearing a sharp, midnight blue suit, and my presence filled the room with a weight that was undeniable. The silence was absolute as I walked to the podium. Mr. Sterling's eyes went wide. Sarah actually gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Maya?" Mr. Sterling whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and terror. "What is this?" "This is a mistake. Security, remove this woman." "Sit down, Arthur," I said, my voice echoing through the chamber with a cold, crystalline clarity. "I am the Phoenix. And I am the only reason you aren't currently being fitted for a prison uniform. But if you interrupt me again, I might just decide to let you rot." I didn't start with the structural fixes. Instead, I opened my laptop and projected a series of files onto the massive screen. I didn't show blueprints. I showed the metadata of the emails Sarah had used to frame me. I showed the original calculations I had made for the Skyline project, and then I showed the adjustments Sarah had made to save money, adjustments that were the direct cause of the building's failure. But I went further. I showed the digital records of the bank accounts Mr. Sterling had used to hide the millions he had embezzled from the project's safety fund. I showed the recordings I had secretly made in the office during my final months, recordings of him and Sarah laughing about how the deadweight would take the fall for their crimes. The room erupted into chaos. The junior architects who had once snickered at me now looked at the floor in shame. The city council members were calling for immediate arrests. Sarah started to scream, a high-pitched, desperate sound, accusing me of hacking and fabrication, but the evidence was overwhelming. I had spent 3 years building a digital trap, and she had walked right into it. "The Skyline project can be saved," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "But not by Apex Designs. As of 9 a.m. this morning, my firm, Visionary Foundations, has acquired the majority of your debt. We have the backing of the primary investors. Mr. Sterling, you are no longer the owner of this project. You are no longer the owner of anything. You are finished. And Sarah, the police are waiting for you in the lobby. I believe the charge is criminal negligence and corporate fraud. The justice was swift and total. Mr. Sterling lost his firm, his assets, and his freedom. Sarah was sentenced to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. I took over the Skyline project and finished it in 18 months. It became the most iconic building in the country, a symbol of resilience and truth. A year after the building opened, I was sitting in my penthouse office, looking out at the city I had helped rebuild. My assistant informed me that I had visitors. It was my family. My father, David, and Elena. They looked small and fragile in the vastness of my office. They had lost their social standing and much of their wealth in a series of scandals that had finally caught up with them. "Maya, my dear," my father said, his voice cracking as he tried to summon his old authority. "We saw your interview on the news. We were so moved. We always knew you had the strength in you. We were just pushing you to make sure you reached your full potential. And now that you've achieved so much, we thought it was time to put the past behind us. David's clinic is struggling, and Elena's research needs funding. We are family, after all." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had ignored 17 calls while I lay dying on a floor. I looked at the people who had called me a pathetic failure and erased me from their lives when I was at my lowest. I didn't feel the old pain. I didn't feel the need for their approval. I felt a profound, peaceful indifference. "You told me once that I was replaceable," I said, my voice steady and calm. "And you were right. I replaced the toxic people in my life with people who value integrity. I replaced my old, broken identity with a new, powerful one. And today, I am replacing you with silence." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, her eyes filling with tears. "I mean, security will show you the way out. I have a meeting with the Secretary of State. Unlike you, I have a legacy to build. Do not contact me again. I am no longer the failure you disowned. I am the architect of my own life. And in my world, there is no room for you." As they were led out, their pleas echoing in the hallway, I turned back to the window. I wasn't just a woman who had survived a betrayal. I was the woman who had used the stones thrown at her to build a skyscraper. I had learned that the most powerful revenge isn't a loud explosion, it's a quiet, undeniable success. I had survived the 17 missed calls, the exile, and the lies. I had found my truth, and it was standing tall, touching the sky for everyone to see. I was Maya, the architect of silence, and I was finally, truly home.